Hello, and welcome back to the Future of Mining podcast. I'm your host, John Varson, the coordinator of FEMP. The Future of Mining podcast is our show about how the perception of mining is shifting and how technology, research, and the geopolitical landscape is creating new opportunities for the future. Today, we are talking to Professor Rodrigo Serna from Aalto University's School of Chemical and Metallurgical Engineering. Not only is Rodrigo the head of department at Aalto University, he's also the chairman of FEMP, so has a unique perspective to share with us on how mining education is evolving to better suit the needs of both industry and, of course, the students. This is a great opportunity to catch up with him to discuss how the School of Chemical and Metallurgical Engineering is playing an increasingly important role in mining education, to learn what research topics he is focused on and where he sees mining education developing in the coming years. It will also be interesting to hear how collaborating with industry is helping to drive research and why raw material processing is so important for the green transition and the future industrial activity in Europe. We will also discuss how the perception of mining is changing and why this is a great opportunity for students to build their career in the industry. Let's welcome Professor Rodrigo Serna. Thanks for joining us on the Future of Mining podcast, Rodrigo. We really appreciate it. Thanks for giving us your time. Today we're going to talk about the critical role that chemical engineering and metallurgical engineering plays in the processing of critical raw materials and how your department at Aalto University supports and interacts with the European Mining Course program. Perhaps you could start off by telling us a little about yourself and your role at Aalto University.
Sure. First of all, thanks a lot for inviting us or inviting me here, John. It's a pleasure being here. I'm really happy to hear that you are preparing these podcasts. I hope there's a lot of people interested on listening to what we have to say about the world of raw materials, which is very, very important nowadays. So about myself, I think I'll be quite brief. So I'm professor in Aalto University here in Finland. I have been in this position as professor already for 10 years, and my field is officially called mineral processing and recycling. So we do teaching and research on different aspects of raw materials. So raw materials is the general topic, right? So we talk about mining as primary raw materials and recycling as secondary raw materials. And there's a lot of overlap between these two types of raw materials from the perspective of the way in which we can produce them, right? So we are process engineers here at the School of Chemical Engineering. We are process engineers, so a lot of the processes that we use for either extracting or processing of minerals and the recycling of end-of-life products is similar. So that's what we do. And already it will be 2 years soon. I have been the head of department at Department of Chemical and Metallurgical Engineering. And also, since I started here, I have been involved in from day one, I have been involved in the European Mining Course in its different forms. So I have been directly involved in teaching for the European Mining Course.
Fantastic. There's a lot of misconceptions about mining. Most people think of it as kind of a low-tech or dirty industry. They usually have this mental image of a kind of a large open pit mine in Australia or in Africa. And they're perhaps unaware of how the industry is transforming, or indeed the critical role that the processing plant plays in converting these raw materials extracted into something that we can actually use in our daily lives. Perhaps you can explain the role that the processing plant plays and why mineral processing is so important today.
I gladly explained it, but I think you are touching a very important point here by talking about misconceptions, John. You are talking about the misconception of a large open pit mine, for instance, but I think that whenever I've spoken with potential students or even with the general public, right, what they imagine is not even an open pit mine. They think of these underground tunnels, right, and mining being very dirty. This image of the old mining crew, all covered in soot and then they imagine these very let's say, unhealthy conditions where mining takes place. And of course, if you would imagine that mining still happens in that way, then that would be really, really problematic, right? Of course, I'm not talking about these informal mines or what they call artisanal mining, which unfortunately still takes place
It exists,
under
yeah.
such conditions, right? But in our industrialized world, in our industrial mining, we no longer see those kind
Yeah.
of pictures, right? So it is like any industry has been transformed from the 20th century, all throughout the 20th century. Now we're in the 21st century, and we're bringing new technology. And I think the key here is that technology evolves because we need it to be more efficient. We need to have much more control of our processes. We need to find ways in which our products are more reliably produced. That's the let's say the ultimate driver of any process, right? So as
Yeah.
process engineers, think how can we make our process reliable, controllable, how can we make it economical, right? So how can we deliver on promises of certain product quality and quantity, right? So this cannot be done if we would have stuck with the old artisanal mining way or the way in which we do this manually.
Yeah. So we've kind of been
The first
forced into it, right?
Exactly,
Yeah, yeah,
exactly. It,
yeah.
it, it simply cannot happen, right? And particularly not at the huge quantities that raw materials are required nowadays, right? In these technologically advanced societies.
Yeah.
So that is a misconception that I think it's really important to address. It doesn't happen nowadays because technology is needed. And this technology has been developed well throughout the years in a way that mines look very different to what we see in cartoons, right? Or what we saw in these old pictures, right?
Yeah.
Uh,
Absolutely.
anyone who is visiting a mine, they will realize, well, we have tunnels that look like roads, right? You need huge equipment to fit in there and have it go and extract the materials in a safe manner, in a safe and clean manner, right? And well, after the well, and this is something that is important to highlight. It's an industry. It's an industry, and it requires technology. And this is technology that continues evolving, catching up with the new trends because we need to be always more efficient. We need to produce our products in a better way. So that is one of the things that's only always important to keep in mind. So the mining industry is an industry. It's technologically driven, and the part of this industry in which I'm involved, you were asking about the processing of minerals, right? So
Yeah,
the
because
mineral,
because because the most people understand about the extraction,
yes,
and that's all they know. So they
exactly.
don't really understand that this is massive industrial complex around the
Mhm.
processing to convert this raw material that's coming out of the ground to make it
Mhm.
useful for their daily lives. So perhaps
Yes,
just give us a bit more of an in-depth understanding about the critical role that the processing plant plays.
certainly. Certainly. So basically, when you have so as you said, everybody understands that minerals come from the ground, right? So you have to have a mine, whether you have it an open pit or whether it's underground. I think we all understand that rocks are being taken out from the ground, right? Rocks are being extracted from the ground. But here's another perhaps misconception caused by our popular culture, right? So all this idea that that you take out these large rocks, and some of these rocks are already lumps of your metals, for example, or they contain lumps of metals, or I'm thinking I'm thinking a lot about how what are the images that we see, right? So opening up cracking open a rock and finding a diamond inside, right? So that's what people think of. Reality is much more complex than that. So particularly high value metals, they are found in very low concentrations in these rocks, right? Uh, there needs to be very well-defined process in which we transform these rocks that we have extracted in order for them to become usable products, right? So if we think about metals that are used commonly, like for example copper, you will not find you will very unlikely find lumps of copper from your minerals, right? From your mineral rocks. You find them in a very low concentration. They are little grains that can have a very low concentration, maybe 1 or 2% of your rock is this copper containing mineral, right? So what do? You need to find ways in which you will crack open these rocks and start collecting these very low concent very these metals that are found in very low concentration. Of course, you cannot do that manually, or well, you could do it manually, but then it would take you ages, right? That wouldn't be economically feasible. So what we have are separation technologies, and that's what mineral processing is about. Mineral processing is a series of separation technologies designed to concentrate the minerals of interest, right? Or to clean up the minerals of interest, depending on what is the product that you're looking at. Particularly for metallic ores, this can be very demanding, right? Because as I said, they are very low concentration metals. I was talking about copper being in the 1 or 2%. But if we think about platinum group metals or gold, they are in the parts per million range. So it is a very demanding process you need to carry out in order for you to get a certain concentration that then can go to the subsequent metallurgical purification. So these are transformative stages that have to do with the separation of the minerals that you do not need, or that have very low economic value, and concentrating those which are of interest. And there's a lot of technology there that is required to process large quantities of minerals that are being extracted, right?
Yeah. So there's a lot of research and development going on
Mhm.
in that space to kind of get more value from this extraction process, from the processing and the
Yes.
concentration. Can you
Mhm.
give us some kind of insights into what's being planned at Aalto University in the School of Chemical and Metallurgical Engineering, and why this is interesting to EMC students or European mining course students and to the industry as a whole?
For sure. So let's perhaps start in a very general way. So what is it that now the mining industry is looking at, right? So as we said, these are technologies that need to start becoming more efficient for two reasons. One of them is that the demand of metals is growing, right? So every time we have more people and we have larger demand of metals because there's a lot of emerging economies that are demanding more goods, right? So mines need to become more efficient. But at the same time, our mining sites are being depleted because we have been exploiting them for years, right? So we need to become more efficient on extracting more in mineral bodies that have less of the materials that are of interest for us. So
Yeah.
that requires a lot of development, a lot of know-how. That is one of the first challenges, right? So what is the other challenge is also how to be less impactful to the environment, right? So we hear a lot about how the mining industry is considered a dirty industry, and we have very bad examples that have made it to the news in recent years about, like mishandling of mineral waste, for example. So therein lies another challenge, right? So how do we properly manage our waste? How do we manage waste in that is being produced throughout this processing of minerals? How do we minimize our impact to the environment so that mining can be socially acceptable, right? So environmental impact is another big thing. And then the use of resources, right? So all these processes that I have described, they demand all sorts of inputs, right? So we're talking about how much energy is required in these processing plants. We require other natural resources such as water, for example. There's some chemicals that are consumed by the processes as well. So how do we use all of these natural resources more efficiently? So not only the impact at the pipe end, right? So at the end of the pipe, so our discharge, but also how do we make a more efficient use of our natural resources? So all of these requires a lot of research. And here in Aalto, we are somehow addressing these issues, at least in a few ways, right? So we have research projects, for instance, related to the use of or the development of chemistries of low impact. That is one of the things that my research group is doing quite actively, right? So we are thinking of chemical reagents that would be produced perhaps from natural resources, from renewable resources, and that could have a low impact on the environment. But at the same time, these new chemistries also need to be more efficient, right? They have to process. They have to allow us processing a larger amount of minerals or produce or concentrate them in more efficient ways. The use of water or the recirculation of water also within the plants is something that we are trying to develop, and also developing new ways in which we look at the process in a more systemic manner, right? So looking at these processing plants not only as isolated stages of the mine, but looking at them in a more systemic manner, from the extraction of the minerals to the use of those minerals and their recirculation into the value chains.
Yeah.
So that has to do more on the process engineering of the raw materials.
So that's a good opportunity for students if they're wanting to impact how the environment is impacted. They can fit nicely into research and development in this space and really impact the future use of how chemicals are used in processing these necessary and critical minerals and metals, but also reduce water use, reduce energy use, and make a really strong impact, not only in the mining industry itself, but in how it affects the environment, which
I think
is
that's
really key today.
Yes, I think that's a very good point. So of course we have these new generations that have become very well aware of the environmental impacts of all sorts of industries, right? Not just the mining industry, chemical industry as well, or the energy production industry. And there are fields such as environmental engineering that look into addressing some of the issues or to monitor these issues. And of course, I'm not trying to say that the environmental engineer is not an important specialization, right? But I think it's important also to understand how impactful it is to know how these industries work in order to improve them, right? So someone who has a real concern of the environmental impact of the mining industry, uh, one can do things by becoming an expert on the mining industry itself and understand what are the real issues there, what are the real sources of impact on the environment, what are the pain points, and how can one address them. So this is a reality.
Yeah.
I think that one can change the industry by becoming part of it.
The next topic, which I wanted to cover, which was how and why the university is collaborating with industry and why building a career in industry could be interesting to potential students and budding entrepreneurs as well, of course. Um,
Yeah.
I often talk about how education and research programs are the gateway to industry, but perhaps you could start off by giving us some background and why universities have such a strong connection to industry.
Well, I think that it is a necessity, right? So actually, depending on which fields you're talking about, and there may be some universities who feel like, well, they are more academic oriented. Aalto is not like that. Aalto has strong roots with collaboration with industry. We were called the Technical University of Helsinki a few years ago, and it has had a very strong connection with the industry historically, right? Why is this collaboration needed? I think that industry requires very quick changes,
Yeah, it's not
right?
just about money, right? It's also about the linkage with the industry itself.
Yes, yes. Well, first of all, we are educating the people who will join the industry, right? So that's already a very strong connection. We are trying to teach the students. We are trying to educate the students in a way that they can bring real practical knowledge to the industry, right? So we have a very strong connection there. But when it comes to research, I think that universities have the ability to ask hard questions, and I think that is really important. That is our role, right? So the industry carries out their own research and development. They carry out their own activities that are, of course, very valuable. There's a lot of development and knowledge being generated by industry themselves. They have also a lot of experience, right? But they are many times addressing the customer needs, for example, or very specific aspects of the industry they are serving. An industry has the ability of, or let's call it the flexibility of asking, as I said, harder questions and also taking a little bit longer time to try to find answers to questions that are not so immediate, right? So research for the mid or long term time frames, right? So what we do, for instance, is really asking, well, what has the industry been doing, and maybe why hasn't the industry done something in a certain manner, right? So why has the industry never thought of doing this, right? And we have the time and the resources to perhaps ask something like that, right? For 100 years, the industry has been doing things in a certain way. Why hasn't it thought of doing it a different way? Of course, it requires a lot of knowledge as well on industrial practice. So therein lies the need of communicating with industry to understand what exactly had they been doing, to understand the way they operate, so that we can also question that. Is that the best way you can do things? And by doing so, then we can start providing perhaps some potential answers. Some of them may be less practical than others, but eventually we might find answers that can be of use for everyone.
Yeah. So that links perfectly with this concern that many students face. They worry about their thesis or their lab work,
Mhm.
that it won't connect with kind of real world industry needs. But
Yes.
at Aalto, your connection with the industry helps overcome this concern because they're, they're directly connected to industry. So, what advice would you give to students when they're picking their thesis topic?
Well, if the I will speak now more specifically about EMC, for example,
Yeah,
right? So the
perfect.
European mining course, I think whenever we're talking about the European mining course, we can we can say that the universities that are part of this consortium, both well, speaking of Aalto University and Aachen and Leoben, these are all universities that have traditionally have a strong connection with industry, right? So it is very likely that we may find uh, some company willing to hire someone as a master's thesis student, or to produce or provide a thesis topic for them. Uh, More specifically, when we talk about Aalto, well, I can say that Finland is not such a large country, for better or worse. But what that means is that we also know very well the industry that Finland the industry that we serve in Finland, right? So we have very well identified companies that can benefit from our master students, and they are always looking for human capital, right? So we can find thesis topics for them.
Relevant thesis topics, right?
Exactly,
Yeah.
and relevant, right? So that is something that I think has always worked well with us. We have connections with industry. We always say, well, go and ask this person, try to find this person, and they may have a thesis topic for you. And even if that's not the case, we also have thesis topics here in the university, right? In the laboratories of the university. And our master's theses are always very practical topics, right? So we have as I mentioned, the research that we develop is research that has very practical applications, right? Even if it is academic research, we try to find a very clear connection with the real world, right? So how is this finding, or how is this thesis topic going to help on the implementation of solutions in the industry? So we have both options, right? So either we try to connect the students with companies that are looking for master's thesis students, or we can find some topic in the university that will very likely have practical application, or that will pursue practical application at the industrial level.
Of course, your own experience at BASF will give you some great insights into how university research projects get translated into industry. Would you say that mining today is a good space for entrepreneurs, especially those with chemical engineering or metallurgical focus and skills? Where do you see the biggest opportunities for new entrants in this space?
Well, it's funny that you bring up BASF here. I was part of a research and development team in BASF, which is the largest chemical company in the world, right? So I was there working for a few years right after my doctoral studies. So what we see here is that there's different ways of implementing solutions at industry, right? When we were talking about this master's thesis or any type of research that is carried out at industry level, the idea is to find practical ways to solve problems, right? And herein lies one of the key aspects of the entrepreneurship mindset, right? And it is the customer-centric vision, right? So how are we addressing the needs of the customers, right? And by doing so, well, to understand that, we need to have a very strong communication with customers. We need to understand what are the needs, what are the trends, and how can we help them solve those issues. Entrepreneurship is something that I think that we have heard a lot recently. We hear about entrepreneurship and intrapreneurship. I think that to me they're both entrepreneurs, whether it is rather a mindset, not whether you are working within a company or you have your own company and you have a startup. It's about figuring out what the customer needs and finding out means to address these needs, right? So an entrepreneur is trying to actively find solutions. There's many ways in which we can be entrepreneurs in the mining industry. Within a company, of course, we were talking about research and development, but not only that, you can speak with many of the engineers working in the companies, and they are constantly trying to find solutions because the industry has challenges all the time, right? And you need to find solutions for those challenges. Maybe they are very specific for a mining site or very specific for a concentrator plant. But you are generating know-how, knowledge that can be then eventually translated to other places, right? So that is a way in which one can be an entrepreneur within a company, right? So one can always be thinking, what does the customer need and how can I address those needs in a proactive manner? When we're talking about the development, for instance, of startups, right? That's something that also Aalto prides itself of being like a hub of entrepreneurship. Right? So we are talking about a lot of dedicating a lot of our time in teaching and our research, trying to figure out ways in which we can promote entrepreneurship and create startups. The mining industry and the chemical industry, they're already very large. So it's difficult for one to think, can I really be an entrepreneur? How can I say I'm going to open up a mine, or am I going to establish a chemical company when I am competing with these huge global companies that are out there? But it is not, I think, entrepreneurship does not necessarily mean that you will be opening up your mine or you will be opening up a chemical plant. There's a lot of, for instance, services or a lot of smaller issues that can be addressed by a smaller entity, right? So we're talking about, for instance, having a company that finds software to better address to better quantify environmental impact, right? That would be a way of introducing your entrepreneurship, or producing a startup that helps these companies. You are very well aware that we have been trying to develop some sort of startup that spins off from one of our lines of research, right? So we were talking about our greener chemicals. So we have the idea of, well, for instance, that is a very specific type of chemistry that we are developing, and that is not owned by any other of the larger companies, and that is needed by the mines, right? So there's another way of introducing
So there's quite a few different spaces where there's opportunities for new developments, new science that will create business opportunities for the future.
Absolutely. The key is certainly, as I said, to reach out and to understand what are the needs of the industry, right? And there's many to think that I think another misconception. We started this discussion talking about misconceptions. Perhaps another misconception is that because the mining industry has been there for a long while, they have the answers for everything. But that is not true. The world changes all the time. The needs of the public changes all the time. We hear about new regulations coming. We hear about new needs. Now we see that there's pressure on producing, for instance, battery materials. So that is a challenge that the mining industry is facing now.
The last topic I wanted to discuss was how traditional perceptions of mining is slowly changing. How is the School of Chemical and Metallurgical Engineering helping to shift the narrative towards mining being seen as necessary, smarter, and environmentally conscious?
Well, that is quite a good question, John. I think what is very important is that the general public becomes aware of the needs for raw materials, right? And that is something that we are actively trying to do. Many of our activities are meant to have some sort of social impact, and we are also trying to be very clear about why is it that we need the raw materials. The perception now has been somehow lost. Raw materials don't grow on trees, and not everything is not. I mean, it's not the production of raw materials needed for our everyday lives is not spontaneous, right? So by developing these technologies, by creating these new research projects that are addressing the current needs, we are trying to bring awareness also to the general public. And I think that we have been quite successful in that sense. People are paying attention, politicians are paying attention, and also one has to keep in mind that we are here in Finland. We have a very unique country where mining is still very active. So this doesn't happen in many other countries in Europe.
Yeah.
But mining is still a very important sector in Finland. So we are raising this awareness, right? So look, we do need the materials, and Finland is one of those countries where we can really contribute to address these needs.
Yeah. And that picture behind you, of the batteries,
Mhm.
this is really it's part of the story, right, of
Yes.
mining today. So what's your message to students who care about the climate, sustainability, or innovation, but may not consider mining as a career path?
Well, I would say that one can do many good things with mining, unlike what we usually think, right? So this is part of what we discussed earlier, John. But as we mentioned, if you want to make real changes, you can do that within the industry, right? The mining
To be part
industry,
of the solution.
be part of the solution. We are not trying to be part of any problem. We're trying to be part of a solution, and we're trying to do that by producing raw materials in a smarter way, in a more efficient way, in a more responsible way. And I think that's also really important. I don't think that any mining company is nowadays thinking of continuing doing things in the same way. So they are always looking for the more efficient, cleaner, more economic way of doing things. So it is a matter of responsibility and of course what we call the social license to operate.
Yeah, that's a perfect segue to my next question, really. Our
Mhm.
social license to operate is critical aspect today.
Yes. Yes.
Mineral and mineralogical processing is critical to every mining operation.
Yes.
But perhaps is less obvious to the public. than a kind of a large open pit mining operation or a large underground mining operation.
Mhm.
So it comes perhaps under less public pressure, but of course there's still an impact. Perhaps you could give us some insights into how the research that you're conducting today and your program will enable mines to enhance transparency, community trust, and to
Yes.
gain social license to operate.
Yes, that is a very big topic, John, and I think that this can only be done through collaborative efforts, right? So we are bringing the technological part of it, but of course we need to have also communication with actors at perhaps at the social science levels and at the having dialogues with the political actors as well. But the social license to operate is something very important, right? Because we have been hearing a lot about this concept of not in my backyard, right? No, nobody wants to have, or the public believes that they don't want to have mining operations close to where they live because mining doesn't have a very good reputation. And we have discussed about how the perception is that mining is a dirty business and brings a lot of problems, right? The research and development that is being carried out at Aalto and in I would very much say that in our EMC consortium universities, we are actually looking to find ways in which mining operations are, as we said, cleaner, they're more efficient. I think the social license to operate will come up when mining operations are basically invisible. So that would be a very good way of thinking about them. And really, there are some underground mines that are not that far away from smaller cities or villages, and people are not aware of them because they have been developed in such an efficient way that their emissions or the treatment of their waste is not so evident that they have an evident impact for the population. And I think that is the direction that one should be going. That's why our research is about how to minimize waste, how to minimize impact, how to make things more efficient. And you were saying about how to be more transparent, and I think that is also a big challenge, right? So um, transparency is something that should always be there, but also we are trying to find ways in which we can actually provide the tools to the industry so they can be transparent, right? So we are talking about life cycle assessment, environmental impact assessment. How can we actually measure those impacts, right? I think it's also difficult to demand the industry to change if we cannot really measure these impacts. And that's another way in which we are trying to help the industry, right? Providing those tools, saying, hey, let's see really in reality how impactful are our operations and probably finding which of the different stages are the most impactful so we can focus our attention on those.
That's probably a good opportunity for the budding entrepreneurs out there
Yes.
looking for the next business opportunity. Lastly, I was really thinking about the future of mining on this podcast. So, what do you think does the future hold for the mining industry in Europe, and how can Aalto University and its partners collectively help to accelerate this transformation towards cleaner, smarter, more sustainable European mining industry and help redefine the public perception of mining? What do you
Yes.
think that the future holds for us?
I think we have reached a point in history, John, where we will really need to reconsider mining in Europe. So globally, there has been nowadays like many other countries that have been dominating the field of mining, right? So of course it's really difficult to produce mines where no minerals exist, right? So we are also bound by geographical constraints, right? So we know that the large deposits may be elsewhere. But we are also seeing a stage in which we are starting to question, right, our reliance on third on external countries, right, countries outside of the EU, and whether they will be willing to supply the raw materials needed. Um, so this is a very difficult question because then we will need to figure out where will Europe find its raw materials in the future, right? And the answer may be, well, we may need to start mining again, and we may need to do it in a certain way that fulfills our commitments to society and to environment. I can tell you that there has been, for instance, when we're talking about battery materials, I use them as an example because they are an impending need nowadays. So there has been this ranking done by Bloomberg regarding battery materials ecosystems, right? Within the global players, we're talking about the US, China, we're talking about Canada. Finland has been ranked fourth in the world. And a couple of years back, last year it was fifth, but it was still quite high considering the size of Finland, right? And the reason why it has been ranked so high is because number one, it has access to many of the critical raw materials that are required for batteries. But the difference with many other countries was that it had a very high ranking on environmental impact, on societal impact, on innovation, right? So Europe has this at its core, right? So we are trying to do things in a responsible way. We are trying to do this through innovation, technological innovation, through innovation on operations. And I think that may hold the key to the future, right? So if mining is needed now, then innovation will be required. But Europe is at the forefront, or can be at the forefront, if we put our minds together. So I'd like to be an optimist, and I would like to think that yes, there will be needs, there will be surge in mining, but it will be done in a responsible way. And we are collectively trying to do that both through the European companies, but also universities. I believe we are fundamental to support on this transition to a more responsible mining in Europe.
So more mines and more efficient, smarter, better.
Smarter mines. I think that is something that I would like to see.
Fantastic. Well, thank you very much for sharing your insights, Rodrigo. I really appreciate the time you've given us, and I enjoyed our conversation. I hope the audience has gained a better understanding of what Aalto University School of Chemical and Metallurgical Engineering does, and have a better understanding about the importance of material and metallurgical processing. I'm going to include links in the description below for Aalto website in case people want to do some research further. Once again, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for the invitation, John. Thanks a lot. It was a nice discussion.
You're more than welcome. Thank you very much. Thanks for tuning in to today's episode of the Future of Mining podcast. If you enjoyed the discussion, be sure to subscribe for more insights into the world of mining education and the industry's transformation. Until next time, stay safe and keep looking towards the future.